Okay, folks, let's call the General Purposes Committee meeting to order. First of all, may I have a motion on the minutes? Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Aye. That's carried. Brings us to the Municipal Regional District Tax Imposition Bylaw. Katie Ferlin, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. Available to answer any questions.
Just a continuation, isn't it, of what we've been doing?
That's correct, Your Worship.
All right.
Move the recommendation.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you.
Oops, just a minute. There you go.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to make a couple of quick comments and about it, because it is an outstanding form of funding for various things in the community. I think it's well targeted between the hotels and attractions and sports hosting and things like that. And the public may not realize the economic impact. It is in the report, but that is in the neighborhood of $2 billion. And just the rate of return I was impressed with too from the hoteliers in the association. When you get 23 of 26, providers responding, or 95%, we should all be so lucky. So it's outstanding participation and a great endorsement. Just one comment on GP20 regarding the natural wonders. I think there's even greater opportunity for us to look at capitalizing on the environmental aspect and natural preservation, that leadership that Richmond does right now. But in terms of the river and future discussions, I think it's something that between the city and tourism and other stakeholders, we could really enhance that. So I'm in favor of the recommendation. Obviously, it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Don't see any other speakers, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's carried. Next item is on the emergency response equipment and the fireboat options. Chief Wilkinson, Tim, did you want to add anything to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I wish to add is that there is approximately $8.5 million remaining in the fund.
Right. So I presume that if we go for, other than the status quo, if we go for anything else, what it would be is an endorsement in principle, and then we'd refer it to the budget process. All right, so we've got some speakers on it. Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. Well, thank you very much for the report. Now, I was on a phone call actually for you, Your Worship, and during the conversation, there was discussion around the fire that happened in New Westminster when their pier burned. And there was a councillor from New Westminster talking about how their fire chief was reaching out to all the local fire chiefs in the region, and they were looking at perhaps an integrated or a regional approach to firefighting, especially on the waterfront. And just wondering, were we involved in any of those discussions? I know it's not the same as a fire response to a fuel spill, but still the waterfront, still firefighting capability.
Let's ask the chief. I haven't heard of any regional response. Chief?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, we have had those brief discussions amongst a number of us. The New Westminster Fire Chief was at one point taking a lead on that initiative. However, since then, their council has stepped back from that initiative, and we continue to have those conversations amongst ourselves, but without any of our council's direction, we're still just having outstanding conversations.
And in the event, just can I have a follow-up, Your Worship? In the event of an event, where is the Port of Vancouver? What is their firefighting capability? Would they be available to help?
The Port of Vancouver actually sponsors the Vancouver fireboats, and they will work in collaboration with Vancouver Fire to have a boat come around. The reality of coming around to the south arm of of the river is that it takes quite a long time. They have a fairly short response into the north arm of the river.
All right, thanks very much.
All right, Councillor Day.
I had a question. We've seen very successful use of airplanes, particularly for putting out forest fires. And given that we're surrounded by water, is that an option to use airplanes instead of applying for boats?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the fire department does have the opportunity to use the water bomber system through the province upon request. Purchasing our own water bomber, if that's more the question, is that would take a lot of study, and I really wouldn't have a good informed answer for you at this time.
I just want to move that we get more options because I don't feel that we've really looked into it. As Councilor McPhail pointed out, I mean, why not have an integrated approach for dealing with fires on the water? So I think we need to refer this back for more information.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for the report. It was very interesting, but the high-risk, low-frequency nature of the events we're talking about is one of the things that makes it really difficult. So it's almost impossible to fully prepare for those. But a tanker fire in particular could be quite catastrophic. So one question is, in terms of access and capability for land-based fires, with the high-flow pumper truck, is it your opinion that that sufficiently mitigates the risk for the land-based fires?
That would be my opinion, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then just a quick follow-up, Your Worship. Just the vessel fire on the river is the part that probably is the most frightening, kind of scary for everybody. It's on page 26, I think, of the report. And so it mentions that there are vessels that are capable of fighting a fire that would be on a tanker transporting fuel. I hope I read that right. So who owns those vessels and where are they based? And we'll leave it at that for now.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, the Port of Vancouver just actually published a report about all of the vessels on the south arm of the river that would be considered vessels of opportunity. They're not specific firefighting vessels. They're owned by a number of companies, from tugboat companies to Seaspan, who have ferries running up and down the south arm. They're owned by multiple groups. Now, none of them have the specific duty of fighting fire. They all just have some capability on board. Now, the marine law basically is that when a vessel is at sea, their crew is meant to actually take care of all fires. When it's tied up to a dock, it starts to become a very murky world in maritime law, and it's a very difficult thing, even to the point where the ship's master wouldn't necessarily have to allow us being Richmond Fire, access to that vessel. If the master says you're not allowed on the vessel, you're not allowed on the vessel. And so it's a very difficult piece of business.
Sure, and one quick follow-up, Your Worship. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's true. So no pun intended, but if there were a fire of that nature on a tanker, either docked or in transit, I think it would be all hands on deck. So I guess the question I have about that is, how practical or realistic is it to have an MOU with different stakeholders, be they government or private or other fire departments or other cities, for that kind of contingency that we all hope never happens, so that these vessels can be employed? And I recognize you can't really answer that. You just kind of did answer that. So I think it's just something that if we look at this, it would be good to look at every piece of firefighting equipment that could be brought to bear. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I do have a couple of questions, and following up on Councillor McPhail's comments and also Councillor Hobbs. We haven't identified the situations that would affect us in Richmond. And I think that that's leading to it. You know, we've got in here, Your Worship, the YVR fuel facilities and pipeline, and that's one issue, okay? And then my question is, what is YVR doing, and what are they prepared to do, and what is their safety mechanism for it and along there, and that needs to be identified. And then, as Councillor Hobbs said, the vessels on the river. You know, what's the likelihood? We're told in the report that a fireboat was called once in the last 10 years. To me, that's an ongoing issue because we have vessels going up the river all the time. And I guess we need to identify what's there from that safety point of view. And the chief started to identify locations, etc. But I think we've got to be realistic, and we've got to know what's there, and we've got to have a plan. I think to go what if? Well, a lot of things can happen. We've got first responders that go out, etc. When they're a boat's on fire, we've got other things. So I think what we've got to do is break these things down and put a plan together. I'm quite intrigued, I should say, by the land-based option with the chief with the high-flow pumper. It's something we can afford. And matter of fact, it might be something we should have any. And on it, and it's within obviously budgetary things. So I'm thinking, you know, a major decision shouldn't necessarily be made yet till we identify these things and who are partners. You know, what's on the South Arm, who's responsible, what's the Stevenson Harbor Authority got, for example, within the anchorage or fishing vessels coming and going. What's the Fed's involvement? So I think these are some unknown questions. And it's a good report. It begs a lot of discussion, but I think we have to concretize and synthesize down into really what we're talking about and looking at what the likelihood is, what the highest risk area is, and then address it and go on from there. So that's where I stand, Your Worship. I'm not opposed to exploring more of the land-based options because I think that's probably where our men and women are primarily the best to deal with those things from the land. Yes, they can handle it from the water too, but that's a whole level of expertise too. So I think some decisions have to be made along that way. I'm not so sure I want to see us buy a fireboat for $25 million and have it sit there. And what is it going to do? And is it only going to, and how much of the waterfront, you know, they like to buy farmland, but what are they prepared to do in the safety on the foot of Nelson Road or the foot of where Fraser Wharf was, for example? What is the capability there if there was something that happened at the dock, etc.? I think these are the kinds of things we've got to get answers for before we go ahead and just arbitrarily pick something. I think we've got to show the leadership and lay out the whole plan from here to, if you wish, to New Westminster, and from the Gulf of Georgia at least to New Westminster to where we are. And so that's where I'm at, Your Worship. I think the report doesn't say we're going to receive it for information, but I also think if we're going to receive it for information, we should give direction to some of the questions that have been asked and that I'm asking as well. And I hope they're being recorded.
Yes, by the time we're finished, we should identify options or refer it and tell the basis and whatever, be more specific than just receiving it for information. So we'll get to that. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. A few questions that kind of follow some of the nature of the previous questions, but here we go. So first off, in the report on page 26, it talks about the Panamax-sized vessel that will need to restock the fuel at the jet fuel terminal on a regular basis. Do we have any information at this point if that Panamax vessel will be accompanied by its own fireboat or tugs that pull it in? Do we know how they're going to get in and out of the river?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we don't know those specifics. It would be very unlikely that it would be escorted by its own fireboat. It certainly would have a pilot on board, a coastal pilot coming to the mouth of the river, and then a river pilot taking it down the river. So it would be under the control of the port and through the Pilots Association. Whether it would need to be docked by tugs, that would most often happen through the direction of the master of the vessel. It would depend greatly on that particular vessel. The Panamax freighters are somewhat down the road. Originally, they're going to start with a barge type vessel that would be much more maneuverable. But in the end, that's the size of vessel they would need.
I think it was part of the original approval by the authorities that the vessels coming up the river had to be guided by tugs. I forget the number, 4 seems to strike me, but anyway, tugs are involved.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few follow-ups then. Next one was, after looking into the New Westminster fire and how that was handled, just a couple pieces of information that I learned that I didn't know at the time, was the Vancouver fireboat that came, when it arrived, it was pretty much out of fuel and had a tough time fueling up during that night fire. And then it also had a fire on board and destroyed part of the engine room. So it was quite a challenge for that vessel to come all that way. So I definitely support the need for some consortium to come up with a different solution than what we've tried and maybe didn't quite succeed the last time. So the other question on that is, what New Westminster eventually found is quite successful is they've used a barge and had their own high-volume, high-pressure pumps on those working barges to help put out the fire for the 5 days worth of work. My question is, in the report it talks about the high-flow industrial pumper option. So I don't know what this looks like, but I assume it's fixed to the truck, not something that's mobile that could be put onto a barge and then put into a place where it could work. Is it just in one truck?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, that's correct. It's essentially a fire engine with a much greater capacity.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question relates to, in the report it mentions that the Vancouver fireboat was used twice in the last 10 years. Could you just very, very briefly, what were those? Were they shooting the water on the land in Richmond? What were they putting out? I believe one of them was a boat that was on the edge of Richmond, but I don't think any of them were on land, was it?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, neither were on land. They were both trawler-type vessels of approximately 60 feet.
Thanks. And then my another follow-up I had was on, if I may, through Your Worship, is in New Westminster, another challenge they had with the fireboats is they couldn't put up a containment boom. So there was all this creosote and all this toxic sludge pouring into the river, and they couldn't actually contain it because the fireboats needed that space to get in and maneuver around to fight the fire. So do we have any vessels in our use right now that could actually deploy a containment boom?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, no, we do not. That is actually a process that has to be taken on prior to actually starting the firefighting. Essentially, you contact the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard deploys containment booms, and then you move on from there.
Thank you. Then on follow-up on that one, would it be the hovercraft that would be the ship that would come in to do that? And because we have that already. And also on that same note, could the hovercraft be equipped with fireboat status? Could we pay to have it improved so it could do some of the fireboat work as well as containment boom work, if that can be done?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. The hovercraft does have firefighting capacity. However, it's not within the scope of their normal duties. Their normal duties are rescue and that kind of duty. So their issue with firefighting is to maintain a safe egress so people can get off the boat and then be rescued. And that's their extent of firefighting. They're not going to continue with a firefight. And it's not something that you would be able to influence them to do. It's just not in their scope of their duties.
Terrific. Thank you very much. If I may, through your worship, just two short final questions here. One relates to you mentioned in the report that Vancouver charged pretty much $100,000 roughly per support event. If we were to have a fireboat, would we be able to show up to somewhere, a nearby municipality that's having an issue, and just send them the bill for helping put out the fire, even though we didn't do all the work? Is that kind of how it worked with Vancouver? Just because they arrived on the scene and they somehow participated, they were able to...
Let's get an answer.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, you request the fireboat, and because you've requested the fireboat, there's a charge associated with that.
So would that be something? Thank you, through your worship. Then I assume then, if we were to have a fireboat, the cost would somewhat go down if it's being used, because the funding we get from using it in other municipalities would go against our operating costs. And
through the chair, you certainly could create that type of business model. Yes.
Great, thank you. And my very final question, if I may, it relates to this report, but also more specifically the memo that we received from you in October 16th, 2020. And in there, it said that the Richmond Fire Rescue had completed a number of steps. And the one I wanted to ask about was it mentioned that there was a creation of a Greater Vancouver Fire Chiefs Association working group, and that was something that you were going to do. So has that happened? And what my question about it just includes cities. It doesn't include YVR. It doesn't include Port of Metro Vancouver staff. I'm wondering where part of...
Let's get an answer. Chief?
Short answer. Councillor Wolf, yes, those conversations have started, and we have actually had the port do presentation to our group, and to date, their interest is to identifying these vessels of opportunity we spoke of a little bit earlier in the meeting, and to date, they are not ready to come to the table with any particular solution or funding, and that's as far as we've been able to get. And the other part is through that working group, of all of the fire departments interested in talking about the fire boats, there's only two left in the conversation, Vancouver Fire and Richmond Fire. And so this is why we're here today.
All right, Councillor
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fire Chief, for the report. I think we may have to shift our focus a little bit for the discussion, because in the original, the report was being asked for to consider a fireboat in conjunction with the Vancouver Airport Field Delivery Project. And from the report, it's very obvious that whether you have a small boat or big fireboat, it's not going to help anyway, right? If we have an oil tanker fire or a big fire. So I think perhaps the focus right now should shift a little bit to how often do we have boat fires that would require a fireboat of this kind, a small one, to help. So do we have the numbers of boat fires in Richmond or in the area in the last 5 years, 10 years that would justify for a fireboat?
Through the chair to Councillor Alder, it's not a high volume event. You can count them on one hand per year.
Okay.
All right. Councillor Steves.
Thanks. I've got a couple of comments. One question was about booms for spills and stuff when there's fires. That's all underway, and I think it's because we all raise heck over the TMX pipeline. And so the federal government is putting vessels all around from one side of Vancouver to the other, and there's supposed to be a vessel and a cruise here in the Fraser. So that's covered. The question I have, and this is not of staff, is if it's the Port of Vancouver that's providing a fireboat in Vancouver, they should be providing the same service in the Fraser River and Delta, because they have been gradually shifting port activities from Vancouver to the Fraser River, and yet the protection they have in Vancouver, they are not providing to us along the Fraser. So I think while we've complained about the port taking up farmland and expanding here, we haven't really mentioned the fact that they are also endangering us. The most dangerous thing that we're having right now is an LNG plant in Delta. In the United States, they do not allow new LNG plants to be built anywhere near residential areas and cities, simply because of the risk. And they're concerned not only just of fires and ships blowing up and things like that, but they're also concerned about sabotage from terrorists and who knows what. Their ships, they have to close all the bridges when one of the ships comes up through Boston, because that's an earlier facility. They close all bridges, they close all river traffic, they have divers, they have police, they have army, they have everything to get that ship in and out of port. So I think that we really need a real plan for the Fraser for all of our committees, Westminster, Surrey, Delta, Richmond, but it's really a federal responsibility. If it's their responsibility to look at cleanup from a spill from their pipeline, it should also be responsible for anything that happens due to something that happens in their port. And it's their port, not ours. They've cut us out of it years ago. We just got the small amount of port at the Steveston Harbor Authority, but the rest of the port is Vancouver. So it seems to me they should be providing the fireboat.
Okay. So, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. So, question to staff. It seems to me that these boat tanker fires are quite rare. I think I was looking up something, and I think in, what was it, 33 years they had 88 cases, and that was before 2013. So like worldwide over a certain size of tanker. So it seems that they're quite rare. We haven't had any in Canadian waters, have we, that we know of, that we're worried about?
Through the chair to Council Liu, you're correct, there are extremely rare occasions where large vessels catch on fire. There have been examples of large fires on vessels, but they're exceedingly rare.
Okay. Now it occurs to me too, the Boston tankers are a bit of their own situation too, because the boats are coming from Yemen, and so the concern is that Al-Qaeda who's at war with Yemen, will attack the Yemeni boats going into Boston, and that's why they have so much extra brass on hand when those arrive. Now, our boats aren't coming from Yemen, and they're not Yemeni boats. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, they're not.
Where are our boats coming from, the boats that would be coming here?
I think with the Vancouver Fuel Consortium, they look to purchase fuel at the cheapest locations they can. And so it can vary quite widely, but I can't imagine them wanting to go as far as Yemen because of the transport costs. Mostly it comes from fairly close quarters.
From the U.S., so it's just more than one producer out of the
Yeah.
U.S. Okay, and then,
Yeah,
and certainly any accident could be potentially catastrophic. We have big fuel facility at the airport itself, right? Have we ever had an incident with one of those tanks?
Through the chair, we have not.
Okay, thank you.
All right. From my point of view, I think that our major responsibility is on the land side. And, you know, as tragic as a fire in the middle of the river could be, it's when it gets near land and gets near the people and the residents and the businesses of Richmond, I think that's the big concern. That's why I think that this land-based option, the high-flow industrial pumper, would do the trick. The others, it just seems like the cost is too much, and the return on it would be just far less than we would, well, and this is a good thing. We just would very rarely be using them. So that would be my suggestion is to approve the land-based option, this high-flow industrial pumper. So I don't know what motion anybody wants to make or whether you want to refer it back for more information or just whatever. So I'll turn it over to the meeting for whatever you think. Sorry, Councillor Liu?
I'll move the high-flow pumper.
So if that's the motion, would be the pumper, and the source of funds for that would be that money coming from the jet fuel agreement. Yeah? So that's your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's seconded by Councillor Howe. All right, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the motion on the floor, but just wondering if we could have an addition. I mean, I think the land-based option is good. I think there's multi-use capability, so I think that's a really good option for us to look at. But I think we need to continue the discussions with other Lower Mainland municipalities and the port and Vancouver as well. I think we need to be prepared for a worst-case scenario, and I think that there are opportunity to work together in the future. So I wouldn't want, and as the chief said, I believe he said there's only him and Vancouver still in discussions, and I think we know that. Saw what happened in New Westminster. We've had a fire at the Stevenson Harbor Authority not a couple of years ago. So it is a real possibility. So I think I would like to see a venue where these discussions could continue.
Okay, so just let me get that straight. So you're suggesting that we would give staff a direction to continue the discussions for a regional solution regarding fire protection on the water?
Yes.
That's what you're saying? Now, I'll ask the mover, are you okay to add that?
Yes.
And the seconder, anybody objecting to adding that? Okay, so we'll consider that the second part of the motion. We'll go to Councillor Day.
I did, at the beginning of this, say I wanted to refer this back. And I understand from you educating me last week that a referral trumps a motion. So that has to be voted on first.
I don't know why you're strident. Just make your motion. You want to refer it back, and just tell us the purpose.
Okay, the purpose is we don't know anything about this type of fire suppression. And on this report, which is far too limited, we can't possibly make an educated decision. It must be referred back to look at a number of things. Number one, we need to go back to the original promises that VAFFC made to the City of Richmond and the Port of Vancouver. We need to go back to the Port of Vancouver decision where they also made promises that fire suppression was going to be handled. And then we need to go back for more information. For example, the chief recommended or mentioned that the Port of Vancouver had a report on all of the ships that could potentially be used. We need a copy of that. Councillor Liu mentioned we've had no trouble at the tank farm. Well, it's not a marina. It's not a marine facility. So there's quite a difference there. So the difference between the tank farm at the airport, the difference between an offloading facility for ships from around the world are going to be coming with various limitations in their safety equipment to our marine terminal. And the big thing here is the Port of Vancouver is the landlord for that 80 million liter jet fuel tank farm. They must take responsibility for this. So, yeah, let's refer it back.
So just a minute. Your motion, as I hear it, is to refer it back to staff to look, first of all, at the promises and the commitments made by the VAFFC regarding fire suppression. And secondly, to discuss the matter with Port Metro Vancouver, again, about fire suppression in relation to the jet fuel. Is that
Yes.
have I got that right? Okay. So
Yes.
is that seconded? It's seconded by Councillor Wolf. Okay, we are now on the referral. Anybody, Councillor Steves, did you want to speak on the referral or on the main motion?
I was on the main motion.
Okay, so we'll see how the referral goes and then we'll come back. Councillor Au on the referral.
Yes, I just want to ask, could those 2 points be included in the original motion? I mean, there's no point to refer back. I understand that, and I agree with you that those things have to be discussed, right? We have to continue to pursue. But do we need to stop this process, refer back and talk about it? Okay.
Yes, that would be the nature of the motion. All right, let's see. Councillor Wolf, you're on the referral, not on the main motion.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the referral, just a comment and a question. The high flow industrial pumper, I don't remember that being I expected, I guess, with this report. So I think having it referred back to look at other options and to include those as well, other land-based options, like for example, maybe instead of being part of a truck, maybe there are high volume, high pressure pumps that could be looked at as part of the referral.
That's not part of the referral.
Okay, well then the other thing about the referral that I'd like to say I support is the fact that as we got in the memo, there was a number of Port of Metro Vancouver consultation and needs assessment. I think I'd like that to be fully done because it did say Richmond Fire Rescue will participate in that needs assessment. I'd like to see the needs assessment before approving $1 million work like this.
All right, Councillor McNulty on the referral.
No, I'm on the main motion, Your Worship. I'd like to speak on it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to call the question on the referral. Those in favor? Those opposed? So I see Councillor Steves, Councillor McNulty, the Mayor, Councillor McPhail, Councillor Liu, Councillor Hobbs, are you in favor or not? You're in favor of the referral, but it fails on a majority vote. I think that's 5 are opposed. So we're now back on the main motion. I've got Councillor Steves, then Councillor McNulty. Harold, you're muted.
Right. Yeah, I support the motion. There's only one request I have in terms of the pumper, that it be portable enough to go on a barge, because I think that's a possibility. To give an example, we've just had this huge fire up at Dead Man's Creek, and the ranch that saved our ranch, our next door neighbor somewhere, they got this huge, massive pumper, and they parked it by the river, and they've been pumping water like a fire truck, spraying it all across their yard, their fields for a huge distance, just a massive amount of water with some huge pump that they somehow got in. And it's just a big square thing like a fire truck, but it was towed in and placed by the river. And it seems to me if we have a pumper like that that could be put in a barge, that we can attack just about any fire, because it's amazing to see it in operation. In fact, I think I posted it on Facebook or on Twitter. You might see just the spout of the fire hose going across the land. But it seems to me that something like that is perfectly adequate from our point of view. And in terms of the river, yes, we should go after the port. But I think we need some protection on shore as well, and this would do it for us.
All right. We can add that on to the direction to staff to take a look to see, as they go through the process, to see whether it could be put on a barge. Is everybody comfortable with adding that to the motion? Okay, so I'll take it that that's part of the direction as well. All right, we've got Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm not quite sure what the second part is. I am supporting it, and I do believe that the pumper truck is on it. And I think part of that, we should secure the barge and identify a tug that could take it out if we indeed needed to do it tomorrow or within 3 hours or whatever. I guess my comment, Your Worship, and I'm very concerned about putting us down and thinking we're going to rely on everybody around us. You know, if you're going to rely on the port, you'll all be dead before they do anything for you. So let's not kid ourselves in terms of we need to look at their expansion. As I identified earlier, Your Worship, I think part of that second referral, and I'm not sure how it's worded, we look at our capabilities and our plan. We have some of the finest first responders in the nation. And let's give our people a little credit. You know, they're not always the grass isn't always greener around the point in Vancouver, for example, nor New West, etc. Let's lead from our point of view and address the issues that affect us. And I'm hoping the wording of that referral of the second portion of it, Your Worship, does that so that we can come up with a plan. And I had Councillor Steves and I had secure a barge and outfit it on my own notes, and whether it's set in the Stephen Harbour Authority, wherever it is. But I think we need to address this ourselves, Your Worship, come up with a plan. And then if we have to bring the other partners around, then we bring them in. But very often you have to go it alone when you lead. And I think that we can do that with this. To have this high flow pump, I don't know how many other municipalities and cities adjacent to the rivers and water have one. Okay, this is a step in the right direction. But I think we need to outline what we're capable of, where we're able to do it, what our points of egress are, and where we're going to be able to go, etc. So I'm hoping that's included in that second half of the referral. Can you help me on that?
Yeah, I think it's an implicit part of the first part of the motion, which is to support getting the pumper and using the jet fuel money to do it. That is totally relying on our own resources. But supplemental to that would be the second part of the motion, which talks about still continue the regional discussion, still try and find out what other options there are. Also, now we added on from Harold that we should see whether it would fit on a barge. So those are additional instructions, but I think the essence of the whole thing is we're going to buy the pumper with the jet fuel money.
And yet let's embellish our plan as well as consult. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think in the motion we better put the money in, which is $800,000 in additional capital cost from a normal regular pumper. All right, let's see, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, through your worship, Chief Wilkinson. Just two quick questions on this item that's in the motion now. First one is, when do we expect the next traditional fire pumper to be replaced? How many years out?
Through the chair, I would expect to bring that to councils this year.
For
the 2022 budget.
So the next replacement would be then, or the updated time of when the next one would need?
That would be the next replacement.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The other question, I'm not sure, maybe if this is obvious, but the 60,000 operating budget impact, would that also be coming from the jet fuel account, or would that 60 grand annually come from somewhere else?
That is not part of the funds that we got from the jet fuel line. That would be an additional level request that would have to go through the budget process.
Thank you. And then just to follow up on that, then after the budget process, it wouldn't come from this $8.5 million. It would come from another source, correct?
Yes, it would probably
Or-
come from property tax dollars or some source like
Oh.
that.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, I thought when I asked Chief about the high flow industrial pumper that it would not be mobile. It wouldn't be something you can remove from the truck. So I think it's important that we don't have the referral now, but I'm going to be voting against this because I think that's what we need. We need to see what is the other unit, what is its cost, and is there one that can function on land and be strapped to a barge? Because think of it, if it's on land, then the only water it can take is if it's in a large tank, like a truck tank, or if it's hooked up to the water system of the city. But that's a limited amount of flow. If you hook it up to the river, you have near unlimited capacity. So it's a very different style of unit. And I've seen many people test out their forest fire equipment, pumps like this, and it's incredible the amount of water, like Councillor Steves was saying, what they can do when they're actually hooked up to a somewhat unlimited water source. So that's unfortunately why I have to vote against it, because there's not enough information. I think there's more comparisons needed. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Day, you've already spoken. Is there? I'm not letting you have another speech, but do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I want to ensure that we can vote on these part 1 and part 2 separately because they are two entirely different issues.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick comment. I think that I'll be supporting the acquisition of the high flow pumper because most of these fires can be attacked by land, and it's important. But just on the issue of further discussions, I also support that because the truth is, the bigger the crisis that is faced by first responders, the more important it is to have mutual aid agreements and the support of your partners and your allies. So I think those ongoing negotiations for some of the questions that have been raised by others are very important. So I will be voting in favor of this. Thank you.
All right, we'll call the question then. It's been requested that we divide them on the first item, which is to support the pumper with the money, $800,000 extra cost be added and taken from the jet fuel line money. We'll call a question on that. All those in favor? Anybody opposed to that? It's carried with Councillor Day and Councillor Wolf opposed. And on the second item, giving the direction to have regional discussions and talking about options and putting it on a barge. All those in favor? Those opposed? So that's carried. All right, that concludes that one. Then we go to the council strategic plan, the 2019-2020 update. Jason Kita, do you have anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add to the report, Your Worship. Available to answer any questions.
All right, someone want to move it for information, et cetera? Put it on the website, so that's moved and seconded. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I think all of us are really proud of this. We've done a lot of work over the last few years, and we've seen a lot of things come to fruition. Just in considering our engaged and informed community, I know staff's been doing a lot sort of in the background, trying to help get our website going and making some changes to that. And there's some a lot of IT things that have been happening over the years. And I know when we talk about communicating to the public, sometimes we as council say that, oh, we'd like a press release on something. I'm just wondering if we could, if maybe Clay or somebody wants to give us a little bit of information about what's the difference between asking for a press release and somehow just asking for some sort of communication to the public? Because I'm not sure that we're asking for exactly what we want when we're trying to make sure that we're getting the information to the public.
Boyd?
Through the chair, Councillor Liu, yes, media releases, news releases are one of the tools that we use. And you're correct in that every audience has a different means of access, which is why we often are using social media tools, for example, to reach audiences in a timely manner. The website is a key tool for the organisation, and we simply continue to look at ways to use that and other tools to engage the communities in an effective way.
Okay. So when we're looking to, engage with the community or give information to them, it's not necessarily the best to send out a press release. And when we are using social media, you're not typically pumping press releases through social media to people to give them information.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, the most effective way and the best practice for using social channels, social media, is to have a means of pulling people back to where the information sits. So, for example, a media release we will use to address news and items of news value specifically to the news media to gain attention. The advantage of news releases is that it can reach markets who do not always access social media tools like Twitter and Facebook and other things. In terms of social media, we use those website content to generally pull people back to the website where they can gain more information and seek more information or detailed information, and at the same time, additional information that they may not have necessarily have seen. So hence the value of having an effective website which contains pertinent, timely information.
Thank you. Just one more question. Do we have a policy as to which languages we're putting things out in?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, my understanding is we do not have a policy per se. We are, through various teams in the organisation, we are looking at ways to address a consistent approach to the translation of materials and also an effective way to address translation materials. One example is that we are looking at opportunities for our website to use effective tools that can actually help translate materials for people without necessarily going to the detailed resources for more complex translation. So it is an area that we are aware of and certainly focusing on.
Okay, thank you. Because, I've heard from some people that, that they prefer that we did it in traditional Chinese, not simplified Chinese, because there's confusion in the translation, and then hear from other people, why don't we do it in something else? And so, I'm just wondering where maybe our next step is, and that I think maybe we need to start thinking about as we look forward into how we're going to expand our communication and improve our website and web presence of how we're communicating with people. So I guess I don't think it's time maybe for a referral just yet. But I think we need to maybe think about this more, and I'll talk to you offline about this. Thanks.
Councillor Hobbs.
Oh, thank you. Through the chair. That report had a lot of great information, and particularly around, food and meals served and savings. But my question is from page 44. I think it's about, I think that's the page, yeah. And it's regarding the flood planning and the idea of the sea gates and the Steveston Island concept plan that was discussed. So my question is that on a particular time frame right now, or is that still at the concept stage? And is there a comparable project somewhere in the world that was assessed in relation to that concept being implemented for Steveston?
To the chair, to Councillor Hobbs, the city is still exploring more options with the Seagate proposal, and there are, according to our consultants, there are other projects elsewhere in the world, such as in Europe, that do have some Seagates.
Okay, just one quick one. And do they also utilize an island as part of the Seagate process? I've seen some that are just Seagates, but the idea of having an island form a buffer is, I haven't seen that.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, I'm not clear if islands are also used, but certainly there has been a standalone Seagate.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll call the question then on the strategic plan. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Brings us to the revised public art policy and the public art contributions. So we'll go to staff to see whether you've got anything to add or emphasize in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have invited Mr. Jerry Chung to comment on the existing mechanisms for funding on the city facilities and additional context to the information provided in the report in front of you, as well as I'd like to, if I can, comment on the options regarding the public art contribution percentages.
Okay, so Jerry Chung is going to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to focus on your page GP 98, and staff have laid out how the amenities are funded, and it's basically called the Leisure Facilities Reserve, and there's two sub-funds contained within there. There is the Leisure Facilities Development Fund and the City Center Facility Development Fund. The Leisure Facility Fund is through amenity contributions, and that funds all city facilities, and the City Center one is restricted to City Center. There's also the Hamilton Reserve Fund, and that's also funded through amenity contributions. And the city has, of course, the Capital Building Infrastructure Reserve. That is subject to the 1% contribution, and that is utilized for most of our major building projects, such as the Minaroo Center for Active Living and for the future Steveston Community Center.
Okay. And Biliana, did you wish to further comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just regarding the public art contributions percentages, should council endorse option 2 to increase the private public art contributions to be on par with the civic contributions, that is 1%. The endorsement would be in principle, as staff still need to do consultation with the development industry prior to this amendment to the policy. I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, so we'll turn it to Councillor McNulty. You're muted, Bill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to support the staff report, of a good report as always. But I did want to ask a question. It's always confusing when we have different amounts and different percentages, etc. And I'm wondering why the developer contribution can't be 1%. Mr. Chung, given the magnitude of contributions, or maybe Mr. Craig can answer this, when we look at what comes for public art, etc., it's I won't say it's a modest amount, but it's a significant amount. And would a 0.5% make a huge difference? I know the developers will say they'll tack it on, and it'll be tacked on to the consumer at the end, or maybe we reduce the other. But are we talking a lot of money by increasing by half with the developments that we know that have gone on? When I look at our planning report, I see the developer contributing $7,000 to the public art fund, maybe 10. Very, very seldom it's a huge amount. So that's why I'm wondering how much difference are we here?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, I'll take a shot at that. In terms of increasing the contribution rate to be commensurate with the city rate, that would be a doubling of the current contribution developers are requested to provide. The scale of that contribution varies based on the size of the development we charge per square foot. So while a modest townhouse project, the impact may be small. We do have large-scale development in the city center, for example, where the public art contributions are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay.
The other thing I would point out is, unlike most city amenity contributions, there is no offset in terms of incentive to developers to participate in the public art policy. It is a voluntary contribution made without any incentive or offset from city.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. So we're looking at two things here, right? We're looking at whether or not we take some of the public art and put it into facilities,
The money, yeah.
or we allow the developer to still keep it in art. So there's our options include, we can just keep the money into the art.
Right, that would be
Option
on
one is
page
the status quo,
99
right?
would be status quo.
Okay, and then option two is, we have it that it goes into the reserve fund that is now an arts and arts facilities reserve fund.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily, it could still produce some public art,
Right,
but it could all be funneled into not producing art.
right.
Is that correct? So we
Right.
already have a mechanism that we get developers to donate or to put money into a fund for community centers and such. And in our community centers can have arts facilities in them, as we have.
Right.
Okay, so we already have that. So one of the options is creating the possibility to take money away from public art and put it into our
Buildings.
community centers, basically,
Yes.
or buildings. And then the other one is just keep it for just the public art fund and not put it into that. That's option 3, right? But then we still,
No, if I can explain, and staff, correct me if I've got the, make sure I've got this right. Let's just go over the options. Status quo means that we continue to collect the money and use it only for art, right? Okay.
That is correct.
Secondly, option 2 is, instead of dedicating it just to art, it could be art and/or buildings,
Facilities, that is correct, yes.
but no further process. Then option 3 is again, it's only goes towards art, but there's more council approval that's involved, right?
Yes, that is correct.
but to be clear, haven't we already added some layers on to the council approval process?
Yes, Billy-Ann,
We've already done that. This just adds even more so that we really can,
the answer is yes. Billy-Ann, tell us about the added process that we've already added for private property.
Yes, to the chair, to Councilor Liu, council approved the change in policy back in September 2020 for developers to seek council approval for any projects that are over $250,000 for approval of the terms of reference for these projects to be cited on private land.
okay, so if I'm a developer and I'm producing a large project and I have a vision for some piece of art that I want, I have to get council approval. I can't just go ahead with my vision for art. I have to have it okayed by the council of the day. Okay, but what we're looking at is making that even more onerous at this point.
There'd be an added step
Okay,
in number 2. I'm sorry.
In number
3 and 4.
okay, and 4 basically just adds still the
Facilities.
ability to put in the facility and still more council
Yes.
oversight of everything else. And
Yes.
then the next question that's also seems to be percolating here is whether or not we double the rate from 0.5% to 1%. So in the last week, we've already been talking about raising developer contributions for affordable housing, possibly 2.5 times, right, for affordable housing and market rental. And so now we're potentially talking about raising it even more. So if we're trying to consider making things affordable and easy to create something here in Richmond, we're making it harder and harder by continually adding on costs, it seems, potentially, if we double
Well,
this.
I'm not denying your point. It's just, I just want to remind everybody what staff has told us. that if we want to change the percentages on that second question as to the amount of the public art contribution, we would endorse it in principle and send it out for consultation. So we're not approving it right now, finally. We're approving it in principle to go out for consultation.
Okay, because it seems to me that if we're interested in siphoning money from public art and putting it into arts facilities, why don't we just increase the community amenity program and forget about the public art altogether? Like, if we're trying to kill public art in Richmond, why are we disguising it in building capital buildings? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. The reason we're here in the first place is because of the previous policy gave us absolutely no control. And if a developer wanted to put up, a very unacceptable art for on private land, we had nothing to say about it. So that's why we changed the bylaw, or changed the policy, so that we now could say, no, we'd rather not do that. I think that these two questions are very important. I think number one, option 4 is absolutely the best, because it gives the council of the day the ability to direct the funds in a way that best suits the city, and nobody knows that better than we do. The second question is increasing the amount, and I'm fine with the status quo for the developers today, because there's still lots of money coming into public art projects, and I don't think we need to take any more. So pretty simple. Let's maintain the control that we need and ramp it up a little, so that if we decide that just no worthwhile project that's coming down the pipe, we can put them where it's best. It gives us the most flexibility. We don't have to go up to the public and do a consultation. So option 4 for question 1, and option 1, status quo for.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Well, thank you, through the chair. Just a couple comments. First of all, public art contributions seem to be working fairly well from what I can determine and from the conversations I've had. It's always controversial. You can't please everybody with the art selection you make, but it does enhance our living spaces and our overall city, I think. But it seems apparent from this report that the contribution policy in terms of raising funds for public art has worked well. So the Public Art Reserve Fund seems healthy and not threatened in any way by running out of money. And there are some legal considerations there to take into account. But when I read the report, I will confess to being a little confused and had to read it a couple more times. Having done that and having had some discussions with it, though, there is no doubt in my mind of two things. One is it's working, and so I'm still not clear on what the problems that we're actually trying to address, although I understand the facilities issue. And the second one is I won't be supporting an increase in fees from 0.5% to 0.1%. Don't think of it as 0.5%. Think of it as actually doubling it. It's a 100% increase. And there doesn't seem to be a need in terms of establishing additional funding. So what I'm actually trying to say in all that is I'll be supporting the status quo for both questions. Thank you.
All right, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. Well, following up on the discussion about what each of the options for the first question means, I have a specific question. On our GP 97, at the bottom of the page, it talks about funds from the Public Art Reserve go for public art projects and for projects in the Community Public Art Program, like the Community Mural Program and engaging artists in the community program. What would happen to those streams of funding in, say, option 2, 3, and 4? Because my concern is these are really valuable and they have a big take-up in the community. I would not want to see these streams have a decrease in the amount of money. It's a small amount of money that we put in there every year. So what would happen to that funding in options 2, 3, and 4?
To the Chair, to Councillor McPhail, yes, those programs are funded by the Public Art Reserve, and if funds are allocated to other uses, these programs may be threatened.
Thank you very much. Well, I have said this before, and I'll reiterate it again. We have a process for building long-range facilities. We have a long-range facilities plan. If we want to build facilities for the arts or for anything else, we can do it. We have a process to do it. So I won't be supporting any of the options. For the question one, I believe in the status quo. And as the previous speaker just said, I believe that it's working quite well, and I'm not in favor of doubling either, and I will be going with the status quo for the second question. Thank you.
Councillor Au.
Yes, Your Worship, I would support option 4 for the policy. I think the status quo is not acceptable. It's not working. And sometimes I got a feeling that we are just doing public art for the public art's sake. And sometimes we're stuck with things or projects that we don't like, but we have to take it. And also, we do not have a clear channel for money coming in for a long-term facility plan. So I think with option 4, I think we have more flexibility, and we can also have a more accurate and also clear channel that we know that we can put some money up for future facility development. And regarding for the contribution, I would support status quo, option 1. And I agree that, we should not increase the burden on the developers. So I would support option 4 for policy and option 1 for the contribution.
All right, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Just, I guess, a little bit different than the others. So I do support the option 4 for the first question on the allocation. I do or have felt the heat when members of the public are really critical of artwork, and I think it should fall to council, and council would then need to have a little more oversight and make their approvals to bear the brunt of that, especially for the really large, expensive, flashy art projects. Because it's a very blurred line. Are they on city land or are they on private land? It's not that obvious to everyone in the community. And then secondly, on the developer contributions, I'm actually more inclined to go with option 2, which would increase both so that we're at a par. I remember on a previous discussion on this matter, we felt that why is the city paying twice as much for these contributions than what the developer is doing, and kind of clear that developers are doing quite well in Richmond. And if you look at that table that's in the staff report on page 102, it shows that only Richmond and Surrey give developers that grace of only paying 0.5% of the project total towards public art. And if the first option, or the first item were to go ahead with option 4, then that additional money could also not just go to art, but could go to some of that facilities cost projects. And then you wouldn't see that hit specifically to art, because you'd still have the art fund and you'd have more to go towards other facility upgrades and exterior features, which our staff has been doing a great job of beautifying on public space, but we need to see more of that on some of the developments around the city, as I have heard some of the not as positive views on what some of these concrete fronts look like. So that's where I'm sitting on these 2 items. Thanks.
All right. From my point of view, I just want to remind everybody of what staff has told us about the public art process. There was a feeling that more process needed to be added for public art on private property, and that has in fact been added. So we approved the terms of reference at a very early stage, which I think takes care of the process question. So I don't feel the need for anything more. And I agree with the comments about the adding, first of all, to dedicate it to buildings. We have a number of reserves already for buildings. And I think that the result of our having public art is to animate and to make interesting scenarios in our public realm. And so if you want, a rather Stalinistic landscape with no animation, no interest, no nothing, just concrete, grass, buildings, go right ahead. But I think that there is a real point to public art, and I think that we should dedicate the money we get for it. I'm also influenced by the fact that we have demonstrated that we are having some very serious discussions about the need for the development community to put more money into rental housing, into market rental housing, into rental housing, and to low-end market rentals. And so to add to the burdens on the developers, I think would be a mistake at this point. So what I suggest we do is on the first one, let's just have a motion on the first one on the option that should be adopted.
Move the status quo.
Option 4.
All right, so status quo is option number 1, so it would be to approve that option. So that's moved and seconded. Councillor Day.
I can't support option 1 because I think we need to be able to direct the funds in the way that we feel is best. So I cannot support option 1, question 1.
All right. So we'll call the question on the first matter, which is to approve option 1. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillors Wolf, Day, and Au, and Steve's opposed. The second one is, remember, it would be, if you want an increase, it would be to approve it in concept, in principle, and then put it out for consultation.
Move the status quo be maintained in terms of percentages.
Okay, so the motion is that option 1 be approved. Is it seconded? Okay, so it's seconded. So that's moved and seconded. I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. All right, that completes that one. That takes us to the motion being made by Councillor Au on the Richmond Christmas Fund. Do you want to introduce that one?
Yes, Your Worship, I would move the motion that the City of Richmond grant up to $500,000 to Richmond Cares Richmond Gifts for the Richmond Christmas Fund to be used for the purchase of a $100 voucher cash cards to be distributed to Richmond residents and families in need that are redeemable within 90 days at any business in the City of Richmond, and further that staff identify the source of funding. So I just add Richmond Cares, Richmond Gifts in the beginning of the first sentence.
Instead of Richmond Christmas Fund?
No, I will say to Richmond Cares, Richmond Gifts for the Richmond Christmas Fund. Just to clarify that the money goes to the agency for that purpose.
All right, so it'd be the City of Richmond grant up to $500,000 to Richmond Cares, Richmond Gifts for the Richmond Christmas Fund to be used, et cetera. Okay, is that seconded?
Seconded for discussion.
All right, Councillor Au,
Yes.
do you want to further discuss it?
Thank you very much.
Moved and seconded.
But the intention of my motion is that to try to find a direct way of helping the most unfortunate members in our community and business being impacted negatively by the pandemic, and to show that Richmond is a caring and compassionate community. We know that the community has been hit hard by the pandemic. We have figures telling that by November 2020, we have 17 1,000 jobs lost, and probably there are more right now. And with that figure, we can assume that there will be 12,000 or 15,000 families being affected. And I think we don't need numbers. If you just go to the food bank and you can see that the demand has been on the increase. I personally involved in 2 projects last December and February. A church in Richmond, last December, they planned to distribute 500 Christmas lunch for the needy. But at the end, because of the request is so big that they have to increase it to 6,000 meals. It's the same thing for a Chinese New Year meal. They plan for 275, and then they have to go up. So I think there's a need there. Now, the provincial government gave us $9.3 million for pandemic response. And staff so far has not come up with a report on how to use that money. And in an earlier report, staff mentioned that that money could cover a broad range of initiatives that we can have. And there's no deadline for when to use up the money. To be honest, I don't want the money to spend on computer projects. I think it's easy for staff to come out with a report saying that, okay, we need to upgrade our computers and make an association with, or package it as if it is related to the pandemic relief. So I hate to see that we use the money on those kind of things instead of helping the needy directly. So the proposal is to, as I said, to help people directly by giving them a relief. And the proposal is to have a $100 voucher for roughly 5,000 families. And Richmond Gifts, they have been operating the Richmond Christmas Fund for many years, and we always know that there's a big demand. So last year, they have spent, or they raised and spent $290,000 for the Christmas Fund and help 3,000 families. And when I was working with the Richmond Health Department, again, I know that there's always people asking for help, and then we have to refer families to Richmond Cares, Richmond Gifts. So I know that we cannot meet all the needs, but I hope that by giving them the extra money, they can help more families and to meet an immediate need. I know there would be arguments saying that, oh, why don't we spend this money on some long-term projects such as affordable housing? Yes, I'm supportive of more affordable housing. However, I think we also to take care of the more immediate needs. And perhaps, Christmas is a good time that we can show people that we care about them, because we know that at that time there could be more demand for expenses. So $100 may not solve the problem for the future, but at least, during the Christmas seasons, we can demonstrate to people that we care, and also we can give them the minimum relief that they can have a better time. So I hope that this could be supported, and the details, of course, could be worked out between staff and Richmond Gifts. So I think we are not talking about the details here, but we are talking about a concept and also a direction.
Great. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I have a question of staff. If this was to go forward, how would we categorize the family community? What would the criteria be?
Through your worship, to Councillor Day, staff would need to take this motion back and analyze it in terms of how it could work. There are a number of components here that we would have to analyze and discuss with Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, based on how their program is operated and what the ask is. So I think it would be a matter of analyzing that and coming back, because there would be, it could be some challenges that could be faced with adding a new component to the program and how that would be administered.
I realize it's a difficult question to answer, but if you were to estimate how many families that were in need there is in Richmond, could you do that?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, no, I cannot do that at this time. That would be something that staff would have to discuss, not only with Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, but some other service providers. And we would also have to determine what that level of need is.
So if I'm hearing you right, we really can't get it down to any real detail today. It would simply be a referral back.
Staff would not be able to provide information at this time. There's some analysis that needs to be done.
Okay.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, through the chair. You know, this is a good cause being attached to a good cause. The Christmas Fund is very successful, and I'm sure all of us have participated in it in one way or another. Personally, we've donated money to it for a number of years. The thing is, it is successful. It has been a very successful, very well-organized, very well thought out, very participatory program that if the city, with the best of intentions, injects $500,000 of tax dollars into it, I know, and I have confirmed this with people who are involved in running it, that it will basically take all the wind out of the sails of a very vibrant, productive community group. And that's not our intention. But when you inject that much money, that is more than essentially 1.5 years of their budget, that can be the unintended consequence of it. Because what's the drive, what's the motivation for all the volunteers to continue doing the work to raise some money when you have essentially easy money? So this is a difficult thing because it sets us up in the position of saying no to a good cause, helping people who are in need. And who wants to say no to that? But on the other hand, $500,000 is a lot of money, and there are a lot of different people and different causes that are also in need of some assistance. So what concerns me as well with this is it seems to lack some policy and some analysis, because creating a list of people who are in need and who would be subjects for this funding if we did it is a logistical nightmare. Like, it's a lot of work to create that list, and you just can't do it out of thin air. It does not exist. There's a lot of privacy issues, for one thing. There isn't some list that you can press a button and get that information. So it's a lot of money. The Christmas Fund served about 3,000 people, as we heard last year. They also did not turn anybody away. Nobody who met their criteria was turned away. So it's a very successful program. I also understand that the city also already grants a grant to Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, which in itself, we all know, is a very good organization as well. I also understand Richmond staff themselves, for instance, contribute about $15,000 just in fundraising from city staff, and we should all commend our staff for doing that, because that's a significant chunk of money as well. So the question for me is, what good are we accomplishing? Is it an appropriate use of tax dollars without a whole bunch of analysis and a whole bunch of work going into it? And then, should we be doing that much work? Should we ask staff to do that much work and that much analysis when it's a program that is already up and running? Even with the motion as well. I mean, the money legally does have to go to Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, but I don't think it's our position to tell Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives necessarily what program they put the money into, because the Christmas Fund is just one of their programs, but that might be a legal issue. Anyway, $300,000 is roughly what they spent. They handed out 10,000 toys. They did not turn anybody away. And my real concern, on top of not having enough analysis or policy to back up a decision like this, which is a lot of money, and I personally like to be very careful with spending tax dollars, as I have been in the past. But my concern actually can be boiled down to what I said earlier. I think if we do this, we could actually take the wind out of the Christmas Fund sales. And it's been so successful, so grassroots, so community driven. I don't want to do that. So if we are going to have some other granting process that helps Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, in addition to what we already do, fine, we can look at that. But it does put me in a very awkward position of having to say that actually I'm not going to support spending $500,000 for this motion, despite the best intentions of the mover and of the motion, because it's a successful program and it could actually hurt the program. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through you to staff. I think this one I have just two questions. Would there be a way we could support that would be an in-kind option for around the same amount of money or less, where the city could, I'm not sure, provide something that we already have in kind, or rebate on some other costs that the Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives has to pay for? So in kind, is there an option there?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, that is something that staff would then have to go back and analyze.
Okay, thanks. Then my follow-up to that then, are there any other recent donations where the city gave to a registered charity like this, where we gave them like a cash lump sum?
Well, there's the entire grants program where we give $1 to $2 million a year to mostly various societies in the health, the arts, the community field.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I'm aware of the grant program, but during my time on council, I don't recall. I remember being asked, I think it was in a closed meeting, about donating large sum to a charity just like this. It's a registered charity, but we didn't do it because of the discussion that ensued. So I'm just curious. I don't recall any other, unless someone speaks up. So we did not.
Well, the grants program is exactly that. We take money traditionally from the casino and we apply it for the community in various ways. So that is exactly the same nature as this. This is a specific request, but it's not unlike all the rest of the grants, in my opinion. All right, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I was a little bit surprised to see this on the agenda. I question the urgency of it. I don't know how it got on. We only had a couple of days to look at this. I don't think it was the proper procedure, but I'm not going to call it a notice of motion because I think this is a really serious issue. We've asked our staff to touch base with all the nonprofits in the community, and if there were nonprofits struggling, to let us know. Does RG need help? Do they need money? I'm hearing that the Christmas Fund was successful. I mean, we're coming out of a pandemic, and the City of Richmond finances, we don't really know how we're going to land up. You mentioned, Your Worship, the grant program. Our whole health, social, and safety grants last year was $593,000. Now, that went to dozens of organizations and helped thousands and thousands of people in Richmond. We know that funding is in jeopardy because of the issue with the casinos in the pandemic. we're going to be going into a budget cycle this year with still a lot of unknowns. As was mentioned, RCRG is already a beneficiary of our health and safety grants. And so what does that say? Typically, we don't allow 2 grants per organization, although I could see this as being an exception. But I think fundamentally, I don't think this is an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars, and I can't support it.
All right. Councillor Howe, do you want to wrap up debate on it?
No.
Oh, sorry. Councillor McNulty, then Councillor Howe. Go ahead, Councillor
Yeah,
McNulty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like previous speakers, was absolutely appalled by seeing this on the council agenda when I saw it in the political agenda by a group out in the community promising everybody in Richmond $100 during the pandemic. And I find it really rather interesting that this is on an agenda, especially when it's put forward by somebody who hasn't supported a budget in the last 7 years and anything positive in the community, and now coming to spend it. I do want to talk about the propriety of us spending money, Your Worship. First of all, I believe this is out of place. It is not our role on it, although I support the Christmas fund. I work very, very hard in the community. As a matter of fact, as I showed you this morning, I have a little project called Christmas in July, where I'm able to bring monies to the Christmas fund and be accepted on that and have it known. We know that everybody is hurting in this community during the pandemic. We're all tightening our belts, but we're working together as a community to overcome it. And I think it's important when we look at the magnitude. You know, we didn't help the school board out on a legitimate request. We have never given any money to the hospital. For example, we could have given a heart monitor to it with monies like this. There are many charities in this community. And one of the things I think we need to work with and support are those, for example, my own church. As a charity, donates hundreds of thousands of dollars to the various things in the community. And so do many other churches in this community. So do other many services groups. As previous councils mentioned, the grants program of what we do. There are people, but when I look at a cash voucher in business, I really think it's not thought through. It's 0.5% on the tax draw, and not everybody supported increasing taxes, so it takes it away from there. And I think we've got to start thinking about what we are all about and what is our business. It's interesting, and I'm going to give Richmond a yes, and I'm surprised that they've been used as a victim, because I believe they are a victim. You know, they gave $130,000 in gift cards last year, $45 per card per family member. They gave up to 10,000 toys away to the needy. They addressed over 1,000 family units, and they gave something to everyone who asked for help. I don't know that they're asking for this. As a matter of fact, when I talked to them, they were approached. They did not come and ask that, and I do want to clear their name on that. On it, I think it's important, and I support it, and I thank them, and we all work together. Councillor Hobbs talked about if we do something like this, we actually, what do we do next year? Do we give them another $500,000 so they don't have to have a Christmas fund? Because basically this is 3 times, 4 times what they raise. And thank them for doing that. Thank you, all the chairs of the Christmas fund, for everything you've done. We know we're in economic times, but when we have just something like this popped in our face, I think it's wrong. It should have been vetted out and written out. There's no criteria. There's no direction. We don't know what it's used for. Just going to give everybody $100. I don't think that that's right. I think that I, and like everybody else, will work very, very hard for this year's Christmas fund and have started already. And I think as Councilman Phil, we don't know our own financial situation. We may be in for a real shock coming up. We haven't been given direction from the public to take these kinds of monies. It's different if we're looking at 3, 4, 5,000 where we've got it in a fund where we can add it to the community. It's very, very important that we look very, very closely at what we're doing and where we're going and what groups we are involved in. We may change our mind and increase our grants if we are actually lucky. Every one of our organizations, Your Worship, and the social services that gets a grant from us, like the United Way, etc., has a Christmas program. And I'm not believing them. There never is enough. And we want to make sure we look at those that are needy. And we want to make sure that they have it. But I think we want to help as many people as we can. I think we do as good a job as we can given the resources. And it is a good cause, but I don't want to take away from all the good work that's being done by people. People feel very good when they are able to be involved in something like that. The thousands of volunteers in this community and that go out and raise money, Your Worship, they feel extremely good at Christmas time. We try to help everybody. We make sure nobody goes hungry, and we work on that. So I think I can't support this. I think we need to turn it down. Because if we do support this, Your Worship, I think we've got to go back and relook at those groups that came that we did turn down, and who will come forward in the future. This is not an option, and I don't believe our staff should be involved. This is not their role, and I think the organizations are doing as good a job as they can for what they're doing. So I won't be supporting this resolution, for Your Worship.
All right, we'll go back to Councillor Au to wrap up.
Yes, I just want to clarify a few points. First of all, I think we are not talking about giving money to an agency. Actually, we're talking about helping people directly. So we are giving money through the agency into people's pockets so that they can spend more for their family. Secondly, we are not talking about tax dollars. As I mentioned, we have $9.3 million coming from the provincial government for pandemic relief, and we still haven't made a decision on how to use it and what to use it. And I believe that the city has a role to play to help people who are being impacted by the pandemic. There are people suffering, and then they ask the question, how has the city helped us? So I think we have to address that. It's within the responsibility of the city. And also, in terms of money, I think we have the money. If you look at our financial statement, we are doing much, much better than the previous years. The surplus in 2020 is the biggest, at least for the last 3-4 years. So we thought about the pandemic is affecting the city financially. Actually, the truth is the contrary. We are doing much better under the pandemic than before in terms of the surplus. And talking about the Richmond gifts, or the Richmond Christmas Fund is doing well. Yes, I agree with that, and I think they're doing a good job, and they're trying very hard to raise money. But is that enough? As somebody has already mentioned, in the previous year, they could only give $45 to families, who are in need. So, why don't we help them so that they can hand out more, instead of 45, let's make it 100, so that it can be more useful to the family. And yes, we have turned away requests from other agencies before, but let me stress that it was pre-pandemic. The pandemic has changed lots of things. We have requests, before from the school district or from the hospital, but those were the times before the pandemic. And as I mentioned, there's so many people being affected directly by the pandemic. So I think it's up to us as a city to show that we care. You know, we care about them and we have them in our mind. So I hope that at least this can go to staff for further information. I mean, for further analysis. And I understand that Richmond Gives, they have the data bank. I mean, they have data on a few thousand families in Richmond. So I think if using that as the basis, and we allow them to work with, or we encourage them to work with other agencies, perhaps, you know, we can come up with a more comprehensive list of families who are in need. So I hope that there could be sufficient support for my motion. Or at least, you know, move it to staff for further analysis.
Councillor Day.
I have a question to Mayor Brody. I am concerned that there may be recipients of the grant program that are in particularly difficult situation right now with COVID-19, and I wonder how it's affected them. Is there a way to word a motion that would, I don't know, somehow integrate Councillor Al's motion that that the staff be directed to reach out to the recipients of the grant program and assess how COVID-19 has affected them to see if they require additional assistance?
Yes, I don't think that you can make a separate motion, but I don't think that is related to what's on the floor right now. So, let's call, no. Did you talk about, Councillor Al, did you talk about a referral?
Yes,
Okay, does someone want to move a referral motion? I'm not seeing anything, so we'll call the question on the motion itself. All those in favor? I see Councillor Al. All those opposed? Yes, it is defeated with only Councillor Al favoring it. And
so I'd like.
I'm sorry?
Can I make my motion then, Mayor Brody?
Okay, remind me of the motion.
Okay, the motion is to direct staff to reach out to the recipients of the grant program and assess how COVID-19 has affected them, to evaluate whether they require additional funds this year.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Okay, there's a second, so it's moved and seconded. Let's first of all, who can tell me, what staff member can tell me how much we put into the grants program? I know that we put about $1.25 million or so, 1.3 into the Gateway Theatre, but aside from that, how much do we put into the grants budget each year?
Through your worship, the total amount, including Gateway, is approximately $2.5 million.
So it'd be approximately $1 million, just
$1
roughly.
million and change. That's
roughly.
correct.
Okay. All right. So that's okay. Who have we got on this motion? Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought we already gave direction to staff not to specifically speak to the grant recipients, but to speak to the nonprofit community to see who was struggling and if there were issues, that it would be brought to council. But I think it would be a question that could be asked on the next grant cycle. But anyways.
Yeah. Through the Mayor to Councillor McPhail, perhaps I should just could clarify that referral was related to community service providers, so organizations where we have a service relationship, such as community associations and societies. It wasn't all of the grant recipients, but certainly that could be an evaluation tool or criteria for the next grant cycle.
Councillor, I want to go back to Councillor Day. Wouldn't your motion be simply a direction to staff that in terms of the grants program, that be one of, for repeating applicants, that we ask how, or in fact, for all of them, ask how COVID has affected them? Wouldn't that be the way to do it? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm never going to learn this. I am concerned that between now and when the grant process is initiated, there could be a number of societies, associations, previous recipients that will fall through the cracks. I don't know that this can wait.
All right, we'll leave the motion then. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This work is already being done by staff through RCSAC, Leslie Schleilock, and Dorothy Joe, I should say, are well on top of things. And it's interesting to see what is happening with a number of the groups. For example, those that took part in the cold night with chemo, they raised well over $5,000. They're becoming resilient. They're taking the bull by the horns. Family Place, for example, I know you all contributed to them. They're raising $5,000 for their operations and stuff. And yes, they're all hurting. They're thankful of the grants from the city, but of the groups that I liaise with, and I meet with the executive and also with their full group, and they're all trying hard, working hard, making ends meet. Yes, it's not easy for them. Nobody has come and said we're destitute or anything like that, and I'll ask staff if they have any. But I think if they were, they would approach our two staff liaisons, and they're well out in the community, and give them full marks for what they're doing. And if there is some issues, obviously they would bring them forward. So I don't think we need yet another motion for it, because I think it's ongoing of what we're doing. Unless there's other groups other than those affiliated with RCSAC that we want to find out about. But those aren't groups associated necessarily directly with the city.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. It seems to me that staff have pretty good relationship with many of these nonprofit organizations, and in some cases, they almost have a better feel for how well they're doing than even some of the board members might even have on the individual organizations. Yep. So I know that our staff is working really hard with the grant recipients to make sure that they're using the monies that they've received, and they're using it the way that it was supposed to be received, and that they will in fact be potentially eligible to continue receiving those same funds next year if they're still applying for them, because most of these organizations run the same program year after year. The grants that they're asking for operate typically year after year. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, if someone of staff disagrees with what I'm saying, but my understanding is you have a pretty good handle on who's getting what they're doing with it, and where they are in their financial space. And if there was something coming up, it's not necessarily in our purview or ability to save them from their demise.
Councillor Au.
I understand that the staff is in constant contact with the agencies, and perhaps, we know their situation. But I see no harm in having another quick run with the agencies to have some update from them, because we know that the pandemic has been going on for a year and a half, and whether or not their situation has deteriorated, we don't know. So I think there's no harm for doing another update.
Okay, on this motion, I'm going to call the question. Just a minute. I'm seeing Councillor Day, your hand is back up.
Yeah. Yeah. Before you vote, remember what Councillor McNulty said. They're all hurting. They're all trying hard, and it's not easy. I think it's our job to reach out. Thank you.
We'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? I see Councillor McPhail, Councillor Liu, sorry? Oh, and Councillor Steves and the mayor opposed, so I guess that, that carries. All right, I think that's it. Someone move adjournment? Okay, we're now adjourned and we'll go into the Finance Committee meeting. Okay, so someone want to move the minutes on the Finance Committee? We'll call it to order. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. Someone want to move it? Actually, we're not supposed to pass the second part of that for a number of reasons. So that'll come back in due course. So it's number 1 is moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And the banking resolution, basically the housekeeping. Someone move it? Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Now, councillors, don't go away. I've got a couple things to talk to you about afterwards. So may I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, we're now adjourned, and we'll just give